begin? Good morning, everybody. Thank you for turning out on not the nicest of mornings in Seville. It's refreshing to see some weather this similar to what I will have when I go home. It's conditioning me for that kind of experience as opposed to making me feel hugely disappointed when I leave the Seville sunshine. We are here to discuss the concept of overproduction of film in Europe. Today, choice is everything, for better or worse. Competition is good. But the question is, are we in danger of overproducing and therefore cannibalising the audiences for the films that we are creating? That is today's debate. We have a fantastic panel. I'm delighted to be joined by four people who have very firm views on production, their experience, and have been in the industry for a very long time. I will ask each of our speakers, starting with Paola at the end, to introduce themselves and give a very brief profile on what they do for their companies, and then we will get into the debate and we'll move down the line. And if Paola and Alexandra, you can share that mic, and then David and María Luisa share this one. That seems a fairly sensible plan. Over to you, Paola.
Me?
Yes.
Good morning, everybody. Actually, at the moment, since 2022, I'm the artistic director of Rome Film Festival, but previously I've been in film industry in Italy, both on acquisitions and production for over 20 years. And before that, the very beginning, for 10 years, I've been a film critic and journalist. So this is my...
This is your perspective on film.
This is my perspective. So since film criticism through acquisition in foreign films, because I used to work for Rai Cinema, which is the Rai film company, the public broadcaster in Italy. So, and the lineup has always a lot of Italian titles. So at the beginning, I was in charge to find international titles to mix and to compose an interesting offer to sell to the exhibitors. Okay, so that was for distribution, and then in production, I went first on documentaries. In a time where documentaries in Italy were only for TV, and we tried to improve film documentaries, okay, with big Italian filmmakers like, for example, Gianfranco Rosi or Roberto Minervini, who won Cannes this year. Gianfranco was Oscar nominated. And then Italian feature films. First feature films as well as maestros.
Excellent. And I'll be interested to hear the perspective of a film festival on the concept of overproduction. Okay.
For a film festival, overproduction, absolutely fine. Because we can find a lot of titles.
Okay.
That
we will come to that later. Alexandra.
Hi, my name is Alexandra Lebret. I'm running an organization called the European Producers Club, who was created by my neighbor, Puttnam, in 1993, and it will be a very short presentation because I've been working in that fantastic organization for the past 20 years. So, and I'm also producing. I represent 200 producers coming from 36 countries in Europe, producing films and TV series, very different range, and that's it.
And briefly, how do you join the club? Is it exclusive? And what is the club designed to do?
You need to be interested into international. Not all the producers are interested by, co-producing, by regulation, by being to each other, by, and then you need to have a certain experience, level of experience.
Okay, and does it cost a lot to join?
very much.
Very much. Okay, so
No.
good that the barrier is there.
It's a joke. No, it's you know, usually producers are complaining before joining, and then they do not complain. So
So you're worth the money,
I think so. I hope so.
David.
I joined the film industry in 1969.
Is the mic working?
Sorry, mic working? Good, says it is.
Do you want to check that mic? Can't tell it.
I said I joined the film industry in 1969. It was a very, very, very different industry, unrecognisably different. Worth pointing out, there was a very basic government support system for British cinema called the Ealing Fund that died in 1984. It was American dominated completely and had two cinema chains. Who colluded. So you had a duopoly of exhibition, you had a monopoly effectively of American production, and we'd been underpinned by a very small government support system, and no training whatsoever. There was no training in film industry in 1969 at all.
Wow. Indeed, a very different landscape, which we'll come on to.
A wholly different landscape. So what my contribution today, I think, is I'll try and give a historical perspective, and then some observations about why I think things are better than a lot of people realize.
Okay. María Luisa.
Bueno, soy María Luisa Gutiérrez, productora española de algunos de los éxitos, bueno, pues de taquilla de los últimos años, y también soy la presidenta de la Asociación Estatal de Cine, que represento a los productores independientes en esa lucha que tenemos los productores independientes por hacernos ese hueco para garantizar esa diversidad de cine que consideramos que tiene que haber, porque más allá de la comercialidad que tienen que tener las producciones cinematográficas, también tienen el aporte cultural que debe de quedarse como patrimonio, en este caso de Europa. Yo, por coger el testigo de lo que acaba de comentar el compañero y que la situación era muy distinta, claro, yo tengo que dar datos. Por ejemplo, en España ahora mismo estamos en sintonía con el resto de Europa en un 9% por debajo de como estamos antes de la pandemia. Además, en España estamos un 9% por debajo del año pasado. Es verdad que no hemos terminado el año y es verdad que el año pasado pues, tuvimos estas dos grandes películas, Oppenheimer y Barbie, que dispararon en el mundo las taquillas. Estamos a un 9%, no estamos lejos, pero seguimos estando un 30% por debajo, en sintonía con el resto de Europa, de la media del año 2017 y 2019. Es decir, está costando muchísimo esta llegada a reconquistar aquellos terrenos antes de la pandemia. Y es algo que también me gustaría poner encima de la mesa cuando hablamos de sobreproducción, porque claro, hablamos de que el número de películas, por lo menos en España, las que se siguen produciendo en los últimos años, están en torno a los 425 largometrajes calificados en el IKA, pero la taquilla es menor. Entonces, bueno, da para mucho debate y mucha reflexión.
Okay. Thank you for your introductions. Excuse me, I'm actually going to go back down the line, so María Luisa, it's coming back to you. In terms of this, you talked about the situation with sort of cinema numbers being down post sort of like pandemic. Do you recognise? I'm going to take that out. Sorry. Do you recognise any issues with this idea of overproduction, that potentially you can have too much content that you're cannibalising an audience? Or is it just madness to think there can be too much film? What are your thoughts? From a Spanish perspective.
Pues en AED Cine tenemos muy clara que lo que hay es una sobreexposición de títulos en las salas comerciales y que estamos maltratando al espectador. Es decir, hay películas que las puedes ver cada 10 minutos, con lo cual una película que dura 90 minutos está en 90 minutos en 9 salas. 9 salas que solo exhiben esa película. El espectador, cuando llega a los centros comerciales, desgraciadamente ya no tiene una variedad de títulos. Si no te gustan las comedias familiares, si no te gustan las sobreproducciones norteamericanas, las grandes producciones norteamericanas de Marvel y demás, es posible que no puedas elegir una película. Y creemos que hemos sido muy cortoplacistas en este sentido y que el problema de recuperar los espectadores es que de alguna manera los estamos echando. Yo no le echaría la culpa a la sobreproducción.
Okay. David, how do you bring your historical perspective to the situation? My probably very superficial research said that in the last 5 years Europe's produced 8,000 to 10,000 films, which sounds like probably considerably more than when you sort of like started. Can we have too much film? And if we do, what's the downside? What are we losing out on?
Well, I think there's an upside which we can come to a little later. Let's deal with the downside. First of all, we've made some extraordinary misjudgments along the way, and I'll just cite 2 of them. One is that I actually opened the very first multiplex in the UK. I literally cut the ribbon and opened it in 1985. And we assumed, as filmmakers, that this was amazing. In fact, I think it was a 6-plex, 6 cinemas, and that meant there were going to be 6 different movies playing, which was great, instead of 1 or 2. And so there was going to be more selection. Not one single human being I've ever spoken to anticipated that actually the same film might play on 5 of those screens and 1 other movie. So that actually what the audience responded to was, oh, this is great, I can turn up at 6 o'clock and 7 o'clock and 8 o'clock and 9 o'clock and 10 o'clock. I just go into screen 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, but I'm seeing 1 movie. So all of us assumed that multiplex meant more movies, and it didn't. That was the first thing. The other really interesting shock, which is more social than anything. In Australia, we got involved in a thing called gold class cinemas. Very early, very, very early. We made beautiful, very sophisticated cinemas, which we thought would just add price and value to one thing or another. What we, again, never anticipated is that people would book the cinema 3 months ahead for their children's party, irrespective of what was going to play. So it had nothing to do with what film was on the cinema. It was to do with the date. You know, they would date Saturday night, the 10th of October, was their kid's birthday. They wanted the cinema for that day. So those are 2 really interesting misjudgments about the audience. So you had an audience that was looking for certainty on date and didn't care about the movie, and another group audience that were looking for convenience to start a film on the hour, every hour, not variety. So I just want to observe those are 2 major misjudgments that we made.
And it's interesting, it's a shame we haven't got Eva Recatea from sort of like Yelmo here to try and get the, sort of the cinema perspective on the multiplex strategy. Have you ever spoken to people in multiplexes to say, or do you understand their business model, which basically burns through a film a whole lot faster? Because if you reduce the number of screens and it was limited exposure, the film would last a lot longer as it moved through.
I think one of the misconceptions, this is me being a little controversial, if you like.
Please.
One of the misconceptions throughout my career in the film industry is that we filmmakers and indeed film distributors assumed that exhibitors were in the same industry as us. They're not. Film exhibitors are in the property business. They're in the property business. And when the property itself is not turning a profit, they'll go into some other business.
As in they're renting seats, basically.
And that's why the multiplex for them, it was just a question of how will they make more money? They make more money by running the same movie in a lot of cinema. You can't argue with that because they're not in the same industry as us.
Interesting comment. Alexandra, where does the EPC stand on overproduction?
So
I mean, David talked there are upsides as well, so I'm very happy we want to hear the upsides because there must be some. There are some. There are some. It's not a...
Yes, but I should have mentioned maybe before that I was working in the multiplex industry.
Ooh,
I was the head of the development of UGC and in particular in Spain for a few years. And And you're right, you know, I was thinking that I was working in cinema, but I was specialized in hormigón, in concrete, in parking, and everything. Except of films. And how can we optimize the screenings by having, in order to have, at that time it was in 1995, to have a film screen everywhere. So we were considering the theaters in order to have that possibility to have, at that time it was a pellicule, it was not a digital, to have some space for the film to go from a theater to another, from a screen to another. It was amazing. But we have, what was positive in it is that we wanted to, the objective is to remind the audience that we are a supply-driven economy, that we offer films, we do not respond to a demand, and that was at a certain scale what the multiplexes were doing, and that's what we need to continue to do by continuing to produce. And I think the question here is raising because there is a cake that needs to be shared, and actually two cakes. One is the audience, the other one is the financing. And for me, the question of do we produce too many films is, should be, do we, are all the films aim to be released in the same way? And secondly, should all the films be financed in the same way? Having said that, I'm not giving you a lot of answers, apart from we need to produce more film, to continue to reveal talents, to continue to understand, to have the great stories. And I've been asked in order to prepare that panel to my members, what do you think about that question? And of course, the producer said, no, we need to produce more in order to discover the talents. Producing can be a research and development investment. And I asked some of our producers that are also distributors, such as Andrea Pinti, and he told me it depends. So you can have also different perspective when it comes to distribution, of course.
Okay, fantastic answer. Maybe we'll come back to a bit more on the multiplexes. Paola, in your introduction, you suggested from the film festival point of view, it was not possible to have overproduction because it meant you had a large amount of choice. But that means you have to screen a huge amount of, sort of films to sort of work out what the best ones are. And with more choice for you means also more disappointment. I.e., if there's 100 films trying to get in and you only pick 10, 90 people are disappointed, and the film festival circuit. So as far as you're concerned, bring it on. We can never have too many films in Europe for you to choose from. Is that how you see it?
On a festival perspective, overproduction is very welcome because you have the chance to choose and to promote, because I think that festival should select and promote especially independent films, okay? Films that don't have enough financial resources or strength to promote themselves as they deserve. And sometimes you can have big surprises. For example, last year, Rome Film Fest opened with an Italian film, There Is Still Tomorrow, which was a huge success. And it's an art house movie. It's a first feature film, black and white, set in the just after the war, the Second World War. And There's Still Tomorrow made more money than Barbie and then Oppenheimer in Italy, and it was sold to more than 100 countries. Traveled a lot, get a lot of awards also. And this is a good example, I think, for but because the director, the filmmaker, is an actress, is an actress, so she was taking a higher risk. Also the producers, maybe also the festival to open, but this can be, you know, it could be, okay, it's overproduction, no? Actors or actresses don't need to become directors. Why not? Why not? So I think that, as you said, we should go on finding films in order to discover new talents. And let me say last thing about multiplexes in Italy. Now, the classic multiplexes of the 90s, okay, are over because you don't have enough big titles to feed them. But art house multiplexes are working very well. And in Italy, there is a new trend, let's say not new actually, it's kind of vintage trend coming back for solo theaters. And solo theaters are performing absolutely well. For example,
is a solo theatre just showing
one film, yeah, all day. Maybe one is open in around 24 hours per day, okay? But not screening all the time. But for example, the last one was in Bologna last year, Cinema Modernissimo, 380 seats. And he's the first solo theatre, in less than a year, he's the first solo theatre in Italy. And the offer is only art house and cinematheque movies mixed. Okay? So I think that this area could be called potentially the overproduction area, because no one wants to quit big scale and potentially successful movies. But the real success today, I think, is more for art house in the industry, in each country for the industry, okay? Which is half industry, half artisanal kind of work, independent. We have to defend independent films that can be very successful too. I mean, maybe more than studio movies.
David?
Could I just suggest one terminology, one word? I have a real problem with the words art house cinema. I know why we use it, I understand. I would love us to start using words like authentic cinema.
Authentic, yes, okay.
That's really what we're talking about. It's authentic cinema. And I think you're absolutely right. There is a growth of authentic cinema. All sorts. But I must ask you a question, Paola. Do you think that your platforming, There's Always Tomorrow, as an opening, had a big effect on the film? Because you gave it a platform. And from many, many, many perfectly good movies, they don't get that platform.
Yes, I think so. That's why festivals are still so important, I think, because actually there is, if not overproduction, but a big amount of films. So we need to select them. We need someone who you can trust and say, okay, please have a look at these because it's worthwhile. So it's a signal, important, to give the opening of a festival to, for example, I choose to give the opening to Italian films, okay, every year. And actually this can be very important for them. And also to have independent movies from all over the world. I think that selection is very important because to help the audience to suggest. And we are lucky to have some many festivals that can do locally this work. And so 1 + 1 + 1, in the end, there is a scale, an economical scale, which at the beginning may not be big, but in the end, it is. Because authentic cinema usually is not so expensive. It might be expensive for one single country, but if thanks to festivals and audience, global now, actually there is a global audience, I think that authentic filmmaking can survive. And we are all involved, we are a community.
Can I suggest one other thing, John?
Please do.
I'm not trying to hold this, but because there's some interesting words here. One of the other things, you touched the word trusted. Okay. So for the times in my career when cinema's been flourishing, there have been trusted sources. Those trusted sources have been, in a sense, critics. So there have been critics who will take seriously a movie, and you know that you like their films, so you tend to follow that critic. Now, unfortunately, certainly in the UK, criticism,
this notion of somebody who curated for the audience as a journalist, etc., isn't that sort of fundamentally the curse of our times, because it's about discoverability, and we are in a content-saturated world. I mean, if we totted up how many hours of content there were on YouTube, how many hours of film, how many hours of TV, streaming services, how many hours of content on Instagram, this, that and the other, literally there's a monumental tsunami of things that could occupy our attention. And through all of this, our film consumers somehow have to be guided or encouraged to find the films that you have all made in the past.
It's a test of trust.
So it's, yeah, I'm not sure. Normally I have an answer, but on this one I really don't have an answer. But it seems like when you're talking about the overproduction, the producer also has to have in their mind, how am I going to be able to market this? Who do I know that I can take this film out to? María Luisa, do you want to make some comments? Because you haven't had a chance to speak for a while. I was going to say...
Bueno, a ver, la sobreproducción en realidad se da por esa facilidad que tenemos a la tecnología de bajo precio, ¿no? Que al final, hoy en día cualquiera puede construir una película. Pero de verdad, y permitidme que me vuelva a repetir, las películas, dentro de las 425 que se hacen en España, de las tropecientas mil que se hacen en Europa, y como bien decía Paula, hay verdaderos hallazgos que no tienen esa oportunidad de ser visualizadas por el público porque no llegan, pero si se han hecho es porque han salido rentables, porque la gente no hace una película para perder dinero. Hay veces que pasa que pierde dinero, pero si hay una constancia año tras año de lo que se está produciendo en los últimos años es porque la gente reiteradamente sigue haciendo producciones, ¿no? Entonces, en España se ha dado un caso este año, que no sé si lo comparten mis compañeros en el resto de Europa, que es que hay películas que han multiplicado su entrada en el cine por 20. Estoy hablando de películas muy pequeñas, como El maestro que prometió el mar, estoy hablando del 47, una película en principio pequeña, que parecía que no iba a llegar lejos, pero que de repente en los cines está funcionando y se está ocurriendo ese fenómeno que pasaba antiguamente, ¿no? de que las salas las siguen dejando porque se siguen llenando los pases donde está esta película. Está pasando o acaba de pasar con una película que es La infiltrada, que es un thriller y que la industria, esa película es mía, pero da igual que sea mía, es un fenómeno porque la industria está diciendo gracias, porque hay un thriller que está funcionando en las salas cinematográficas. Hacía mucho tiempo que un thriller no funcionaba en las salas, un thriller independiente. Está pasando con Marco, que se ha estrenado hace poco, que probablemente tenga la resaca de otras películas que han funcionado. Es decir, no todas las películas deberían de llegar a las salas cinematográficas, yo creo que en eso estamos todos de acuerdo. Los streamers necesitan muchísimo contenido. Entonces, cuando hablamos de sobreproducción, tenemos que decir si la sobreproducción es en los streamers, es en el producto cinematográfico o es en otros medios, ¿no? Yo creo que los streamers cada vez más están tendiendo a intentar ampliar más su público, es decir, que los contenidos que tengan le valgan a sus consumidores, y entonces hay determinados géneros que a los streamers no les están funcionando, como pueda ser el terror, y sin embargo en las salas cinematográficas y a nivel internacional vas a los mercados y te piden terror. Y claro, se crea una paradoja, que es, yo no puedo hacer terror porque los que me financian el terror no quieren el terror porque no se ve en sus plataformas. Entonces, volviendo al exceso de producción, yo no creo que haya un exceso de producción, lo que creo que hay es una falta de orden. Una falta de orden de qué tiene que ir a los cines, qué se tiene que quedar en las plataformas, y luego esas presiones que hay porque determinadas películas tengan y acaparen muchas pantallas, porque eso obliga a que películas que deberían de estar en las salas de cine y tener esa pequeña oportunidad, no la tienen porque no hay salas, porque la exhibición en cines está limitada, no es como un streamer que puede con todo. El número de salas que hay es el que hay. Entonces, para mí ese realmente es un verdadero problema para poner orden en esta sobreproducción. No sé cómo lo ven mis compañeros.
Let's pick up on that in terms of the word overproduction is an extremely general term, and I think María Luisa was talking about a bit of order, that maybe also sort of segmenting. They talked about sort of like horror. So are there genres that are being underrepresented in this concept of sort of overproduction, and if so, why is that? Are funding agencies playing a part in the fact that we're having a debate about overproduction? Because it seems at the moment we're not overproducing, but it's still a debate going on about how a film finds its right place. Do all films deserve to be in cinema? Do films need, is a destination of being a streaming platform just as valid? It's a different viewing experience. Actually, I'm going to come to Alexandra, because from the European Producers Club, you're tapped into how agencies are supporting film producers. What are your thoughts?
Yes, I think, again, I will repeat what I said, I'm sorry, but we are a supply-driven economy. We need to offer every genre, and the one who stopped on the US, they are now offering to the audience only Marvels and superhero films. The independent sector has disappeared, and it's a chance for us, because we can see some European big authors such as Yorgos Lanthimos becoming successful in the US, or in Anatomy of a Fall, for instance. So the range of genre, I think it's important to have, and I would just echo what María Luisa was saying, which happens in Europe everywhere, is that there is an expected successes in theaters. It happened with that French film called something extra. I don't remember the title in English. Something extra plus. It happened in Italy with the Miyazaki, or with the vendors. It's everywhere, and it means that when there might be an audience that is willing to see different films, and I think instead of focusing on how overproducing, we should focusing on how do we increase our audiences, because they are there, they have an appetite, and this appetite is changing in terms of what they want to see, but also where they want to see it. And the role of trust is super important. It's today on TikTok, it's today on social. We need also, as part of the industry, to get into this field, to find these trust people that the young people are following, and to bring them to cinema as well. So there is we have a huge role to play, for me, not in reducing the financing of the film or saying, oh, you should produce horror or a comedy, but to wider our audience and to know how to bring them, because they are curious and they are willing to see different formats. That's my take.
David?
in a way, I'd like to throw a slight bomb into the discussion. Are we sure, we're all film lovers, film creators, but are we absolutely sure that we're not looking at this from the point of view of cinema industry exceptionalism? Because if we were sitting here today talking about the publishing industry, or talking about the theatre world, or talking about other things, would we be, for example, would we see there's far too many books being published? The truth is the publishing industry knows it has to publish a lot of books because it's looking for voice. It's looking for the exceptional author. Because of the back of the exceptional author, then they sell a lot of books. So there are parallels that we could intelligently be looking at and becoming a little less neurotic, I think. Are there too many painters out there at the moment?
Is it controversial to say that the publishing industry, in terms of the authors, doesn't get any public support? Essentially, you're absolutely right from the perspective is the publisher is a massive spread bet. I work with authors who are frustrated like hell because they get published and then ignored, and that's the worst, one of the worst feelings ever, almost worse than being published. But it's still a free market, whereas the film industry does require public money for the public good. So there's an overlap, and then there's a slight counter, which I'm sure I'm not supposed to do, David, because...
No, here's where the whole thing, I think, dovetails very neatly, okay, about overproduction. Historically, when I started making movies, and when a lot of people started making movies, the biggest single cost was simple. It was film stock. You could make whatever you're going to do, you had to buy certain 200,000 feet of film, and you had to process that film. You had to put it through a very expensive camera you bought. You needed 4 people running the camera. And all the costs were physical, huge number of physical costs. Nothing to do with how artistic the film was. The actual production process was cumbersome and expensive. Yeah. Today, it's not cumbersome and it's not expensive. Therefore, the ability to spot talent in a short film made on an iPhone is really down to people like us. We ought to be able to spot a good voice. And my concern is, in worrying about overproduction, I think we should be more worried about, are we finding the individual voice? Because I'll bet something here. How many directors of streaming movies have you heard of? How many great directors are emerging from the streaming business?
No, streamers.
Yeah, streamers.
Yeah, but the streamers don't discover
That's my point.
nothing, but they just bring filmmakers from authentic cinema.
And mostly they make films that look like everybody else's films. You know, and the famous thing in England with painting by numbers. You know what painting is? You do paint.
Yeah.
For me, most of the streaming movies is painting by numbers. You know, you fill in. The director actually being required to fill in numbers.
It's probably an algorithm now, that's the sort of modern equivalent.
AI could probably do it.
Yeah.
Now, my point is this. I celebrate the idea of lots of production, particularly in shorts, considered. There's a reason for that, because I think most movies are way too long. So I think the idea of having disciplined brains that understand how to tell a story in 1 hour is a really, really good thing. But my point is, it's an opportunity to find the individual voice. And we've just got to get better at trusting each other and say, you know what, this woman has really got something to say. And this writer, if she works with this director, that would be an interesting combination. We've got to get more confident about creating because there won't be thousands and thousands of great filmmakers. There never has been. Italian neorealism was 6 people.
Exactly.
French
Pasolini.
French New Wave, 5, 6. American Coppola generation, 4, really. So you're not looking for thousands of people, but you're looking for a few great voices that have the effect of allowing us the conceit of thinking about
where
really important. Yeah? Go on. So do you see what I'm being clumsy here, but I know what I'm trying to say is I celebrate lots and lots of films as long as we can find trusted voices who say, this one is great, and this one is great. So let's get behind this one, not just fund movies because someone wants to apply and is very good at filling in forms.
Alexandra, let's come to the filling in forms bit and how agencies all over Europe are having an impact on the fact that maybe we're having this conversation. It sounds like we're not overproducing, but there's a conversation to be had about something in the independent sort of like film sector. Are the way that the funding agencies set up, is it the people who are running them and what they think their job is having an impact in sort of causing us to worry that we might be overproducing? What do you think?
I think we never know before producing a film if it's going to be good or not. So we need to bet, and that's what they are doing. And we need them to continue to do it, because you can have a good director doing a bad film, you can have a bad director finally doing a good film. So we need to continue to have that financing. Maybe as a representative of the producers, more automatic system would be relevant rather than selective ones, because I do believe in producers. I do believe in men like Puttnam. You can if you are a good producer like María Luisa, you have your talents coming to you, and then you can raise the financing more easily, and then they trust you. And so I do believe that we should have more automatic systems, as it is in Spain, by the way, very differently than it is in France, where the weight of the television is so high that the films that are produced with big budget are with the taste of the TV, and they are TV movie at the end of the day, these comedies. So I think there is a reflection to have on how the film agencies are organized themselves, who is taking the decision, but they should absolutely continue.
Paola, the role of the film festival, I won't name him, but there was a sales agent who said that there are certain times when the endorsement of the film festival circuit becomes a turn-off for the distributor. And clearly, if you want your film to go into sort of like theatrical, you need sort of like distribution. Distribution is focusing towards sort of the cinema end of the chain. Is there any tension between the celebration of the festival circuit that then, clearly there are examples where you've launched the film in Italy, it's superbly successful, but is there a question that maybe the take of a festival is not always in sync with what is going to make a film successful in the cinemas and with distributors? I.e., you're too arty. The film, brutal question is too arty.
I think there is business also in authentic cinema, in art house cinema. So
it was a reported question, observation to me. I'm relaying a sales agent point of view.
because there is market also for this kind of cinema. And I think that we all should be a community, as I told before. So producers, filmmakers, film festivals. Maybe I think that today there is a lack of true criticism. So maybe the task, the goal that in the past decades it was up to film criticism, today is dislocated to other venues such festival, because you have, especially if you have a real audience and a competition with professionals and maybe also some potential buyers. I mean, a festival can be the community, micro community of the film, also industry. And I think that all together we can help new filmmakers or established filmmakers to emerge or to go on. I think that filmmaking is complex, is very complex, more I think than publishing or even music, because music is immediate, simple. So But filmmaking needs money, even small money, but needs money. It's a very complex situation. So I think that we have to be together and make it not only survive, but come to new life, which can be different. For example, the question of genre, I think that it depends on times. This year there is a lack of comedies, I think, okay? And I thought, why? I can't find, comedies, or they're very mixed. And then, of course, there are wars everywhere after pandemics, horror films in the 90s and also 2000 was full of horror movies. They are coming back. Western is coming back. So I think that there is a natural evolution, but what we have to do is to encourage new voices, because we desperately need voices, especially in these hard times where democracy is in danger. So we need to overproduce. We need more books, we need more, and okay, a selection, but we need a good amount of films, of books, of music to select, to make our selection.
Okay, we are coming to the end of the session, I think, so we'll continue the theme of what do we need to do going forward, and we'll come down the line. Alexandra, it sounds like overproduction isn't an issue, but what are the key things that we need to do to keep the profile of independent cinema growing, or take it back to where it was? María Luisa is saying cinema audiences are down. I mean, is there a place for, I was struck by Paola's comment about the cinema in Bologna, the single sort of cinema, and somebody curating a film for the citizens of Bologna. It sounds a bit, shouldn't be your job, but does the Euro Producers Club need to sort of almost like go, hi guys, in France, why aren't we replicating this? Do we need to talk to funding bodies? Could you speak to somebody in your region? It's almost like saying there's a massive amount of content out there that people aren't able to discover, but somewhere like this guy in Bologna has done something. So that producers may be a bit more active in terms of getting their films to people, encouraging cities to look at different ways to expose the talent that you're discovering.
It's what can we do to save the independent sector I can speak forever about that, So I think we should first think about film agencies financing only independent producers and not, broadcasters or companies that are financed by broadcasters. There should be a reflection on where the money is going. To who and for what kind of content. What is the need of money or support from the state to what kind of content? I'm not sure Netflix production needs to have a financing from the state, and they're having with the CNC. I'm not complaining because the CNC is a huge budget, but in certain countries when the budget is more concentrated, it might be a problem. Then we need to discover the new voices, as you mentioned, and I'm always surprised to see my members, they have been producing for 30 years and they are still looking for young directors, they are still looking for stories, they are still looking, and that's what I love so much my job, is that they are open-minded, they are, producers are incredible for that, they take risks. And they can spend, 3 years without being paid, and paying all the others, just because they do believe that a story needs to be told. So I think we need to protect that community of independent producers, and that's what I'm dedicated to.
Excellent. David, thoughts for the future?
Two things. I mean, I think it's not insignificant, but 50% of all, I produced 30 films. 15 of them were directed by first-time directors.
Wow.
15 of them. And that I would actively look. Secondly, I'd suggest we took short films much more seriously, much more seriously. Because in the end, we're storytellers. And a good filmmaker ought to be able to tell a good story in less than 2 hours. You don't need 2 hours to tell a story. So therefore, the training that allows you to tell a good story in 40 minutes and then have people come and look at that and say, there's a voice here. That's what we're talking about. There's a real voice here. This person's got something to say. We should do that. Worth mentioning, I live in a very rural area, and once a year we have a thing called the Fastnet Short Film Festival. When we started 12 years ago, it was tiny, I mean really tiny. Now it's big. But the most important thing in the last 4 years, agents are coming to it. Agents are coming, looking for talent. Now that tells you something shifted. So agents are coming to look at short films, looking for talent. Maybe there is a search on for voices. So that's really encouraging. You're very welcome to come. It's the most beautiful festival in the most beautiful small town, except it doesn't have a cinema. We have to set up screens all over the place.
And to your point of the new talent thing, and going back to your session on what the producer does, or maybe it was your music one, two of the directors you've worked with, the first-time directors, came out of advertising. And I'm wondering, please tell me, are there directors now coming out of advertising in the same sort of way? Because they went on to become, megastars. Ridley Scott sort of like hugely sort of famous. Are we seeing the same routes into filmmaking as was happening when you were beginning to produce? Now it feels like maybe it's different.
Not to the same degree. I think I can explain that quite easily. When we were making commercials, it was the early days of commercials. And certainly Ridley Scott, Alan Parker, Adrian Lyne, we were making short stories. So we were making one minute commercials, but they were stories. At a certain point, the client became more involved, and maybe they're looking for more bang for their buck, but they became images. So then we had video, remember the video movies, so the video things. Hardly any directors ever emerged from that, because there was no narrative. So the difference is that the guys I started working with came from an idea of having narrative, right? Whereas successive generations since then thinks it's about just images and effect. Now that's not permanent, that will change, because things always do change, but that's the answer to your question.
Okay.
Ridley and Alan did short stories and filmed short stories.
So they were already the emerging filmmakers, but because of the medium allowed them to do that?
Yeah, they were just compressed, but they wanted to be storytellers.
Okay. Marie-Louisa, you get the last word. From your perspective in Spain and then sort of across Europe, what do we need to do to keep us going?
Yo creo que tenemos que dejar de hacer un poco de demagogia y cuidar la palabra cine y no regalar la palabra cine y diferenciar lo que es cine de lo que no lo es, porque en la mesa he estado escuchando pues cómo hay que apostar por el cine auténtico, pero luego tú vas a los festivales, a los grandes festivales, y te das cuenta cómo ya está el cine y están las series, y en algunas normativas, como por ejemplo la española, se llama producción cinematográfica, aquella que se estrena en primera ventana en una sala de cine, de tal manera que por la mañana, a las 11 de la mañana, tú puedes estrenar la película a las 11 de la mañana en la sala y por la tarde estar en la plataforma, y se sigue llamando película cinematográfica, con todo lo que implica a nivel de ayudas gubernamentales. Entonces, yo creo que por lo primero que tendríamos que empezar los sectores, y sin despreciar para nada el audiovisual, porque recordemos que todo el audiovisual es trabajo de calidad, por eso los estados apoyan el audiovisual y apoyan que los chavales entren, porque es un trabajo de calidad. Sin despreciar otro tipo de producciones audiovisuales, sí que deberíamos de todos hacer piña y apostar por lo que es películas cinematográficas, y si tiene que haber festivales para otro tipo de películas, que las haya, pero no mezclemos, porque yo creo que por ahí empezaría el orden. Al final todos hablamos de cine, queremos un orden, pero lo mezclamos todo, incluso en los propios premios cinematográficos. ¿Qué tendrá la palabra cine? Que todo el mundo quiere atribuirse ese sello de calidad que al final es como un sello como honor o como ISO. Y entonces yo haría un llamamiento, ¿no?, a que dejemos de hacer un poco de demagogia y funcionemos todos en esto que es tan políticamente incorrecto, ¿no?
It's always good to be politically incorrect, I think, today. Yes, interesting question. What is film? It's a bit like having the same point as David made. What is a book? There are millions of different types of books. There are quite millions of different types of films, but the expectation of what you get from a book is probably individual to the person that wrote it, and then individual to the person that read it. I'm not sure if we came to any great conclusions in terms of the overproduction. I think the overall thing is we're not overproducing, actually. We need to fight for the films that we're producing, and we're, in our production, we're looking for the next generation and the next generation of talent across the board. I think whether we're producers, directors, I think writers also need a shout out, because it's, unless you're the director-writer, every great director is standing on the shoulders of somebody's fantastic screenplay that they're bringing to life, etc. As David has spoken before, and Paola said, it is a team effort. It takes a huge amount of people to make a film, and it's a massively, massively long journey that everybody has to go on, especially the producer, because quite often they're the person to pick up the baton, and they are running multiple marathons to get that baton across the line and actually turn it into a piece of cinema. Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for your thoughts, your insights. Hopefully this has been some interest to you, and thank you so much for turning up on not the sunniest day in Sevilla.